Jeffrey Epstein owned the largest property here in the state of New Mexico.
He had a place in Mexico. I wonder how many other hidden places and secret places he had.
I was like, okay, these people are important, and they had named it Zorro Ranch.
So this is the ranch, what it looks like as the sun is setting. You can see it over the horizon there.
I've seen a lot of really bad things. I haven't seen anything to this extent.
That's the gate my sister went through, like to the gates of hell.
What happened here? How did it happen? Why did it happen?
I believe the first cover-up was in 2019 with me.
Some breaking news overnight.
Billionaire Jeffrey Epstein,
once connected with some of the most powerful figures in the world, was arrested late last night.
Decades before Jeffrey Epstein's name appeared everywhere, he quietly bought this New Mexico ranch in 1993, sold to him by the state's former governor, and renamed Zorro. Off a two-lane road going the back way between Albuquerque and Santa Fe, right on the edge of the radio signal from AM station KIVA.
We're going to Rock of Talk 420 here on the Kiva.
Eddie Aragon has been hosting his show here for 14 years.
We've been covering the Epstein stuff since inception. So naturally, a lot of people with concern were picking up the phone and calling me with various tips or ideas.
One of those tips, an unsigned email, came later that fall.
The big part of email that really impacted my decision to call the FBI is the fact that you had mention of two women buried in the hills outside Zorro Ranch, two younger girls where they had engaged and died in rough fetish sex. And so that was very definitely a red flag.
It's why he says he reported it immediately.
We went in and we itemized the various components of that email. That was it, and I never heard from the FBI again.
By that point, Epstein had been dead for months after his suicide behind bars. Following his arrest earlier that year, in July, investigations into his abuse ensnared his other properties, like in Manhattan, Florida, and the Caribbean. But in New Mexico, federal investigators told a top FBI official, at this time, we don't have probable cause for a search.
Do you think the feds should have searched the ranch back in 19?
Absolutely.
Hector Balderas was the New Mexico Attorney General who had opened his own investigation into Epstein until the Southern District of New York asked his office to stand down.
As soon as we began investigating in the summer of 19, we were contacted by the New York DOJ, and they asked us to stop interviewing some of the survivors that we were both targeting. And that was for reasons that they didn't want to create duplicate testimony and potentially put at risk the case.
Did that seem reasonable to you?
On the front end, yes, that's very common. You pick who's got the bigger hammer and you work together.
What was unusual, he says, is how federal prosecutors then went dark instead of sharing information later that could have helped New Mexico bring state charges.
We assumed, with their reputation for being aggressive, that they were going to be aggressive and then share that evidence with us. It was a very simple 1-2 punch.
And that's happened before in other cases.
Absolutely.
But it didn't happen here.
It didn't happen here, and every lawmaker and investigator is asking the question, why would you enter his house in Manhattan or in Florida and not search here?
Balderas didn't know federal investigators determined they had no probable cause to search the ranch, and he had never heard, for example, about the unsubstantiated tip referencing buried bodies shared with the FBI, which is not commenting on that, nor is the DOJ. Balderas only discovered it all when the Justice Department started releasing its Epstein files last year.
I think that it is embarrassing and appalling. I believe the first cover-up was in 2019 with me.
The former Justice Department official who helped lead the DOJ's Epstein investigation at the time did not respond to our request for comment. And a current DOJ spokesperson says if new investigations uncover potential federal crimes, we stand ready to work closely with our law enforcement partners to prosecute.
You come up here and you look at it. The sun is setting now over these, 7,500 acres that Epstein used to own.
Zorro was massive, stretching for miles. Pictures from the Epstein files show women or girls on horseback, riding ATVs, taking target practice. A small village of cottages where staff lived sat down the ranch road from the 26,000 square foot palace Epstein built, with a pool, an opulent library, tall fireplaces framed by chandeliers. for the survivors of his abuse, a house of horrors.
Epstein's former ranch is right past this fence here. His house is up on that ridgeline. But in the shadow of the front gate, people have put up signs. They've posted pictures, trying to keep the focus on the survivors and the investigations.
One of those survivors, Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who died by suicide last April, trafficked by Epstein for years.
It's really hard. I never anticipated. It's really hard to look at that gate and think that that's the gate my sister went through, like to the gates of hell.
Giuffre's brother and sister-in-law offered to meet us near the ranch, where they saw for the first time this cross bearing Virginia's name.
You know, we know that a lot of pain here happened, but like part of me just wants to feel close to her. So it is beautiful to see her represented in a beautiful way.
When Giuffre came to Zoro, she preferred to sleep not at what she called the castle, but in a cottage closer to the stables, where on her early morning rides, she writes, I could remember what it felt like to be free.
She wouldn't even stay up there. She would stay down here because she felt more connected to nature. And this was all about like trauma and, you know, the horrors that would happen behind those doors. But also, I mean, look around us. Like, there's nowhere to go, Hallie. I mean, there's nowhere to go.
It almost gives an abuser this perception that I can do whatever I want here. And no one will know. You can scream as loud as you want, and no one will hear you. New Mexico deserves visibility. New Mexico survivors deserve visibility. This is another chapter that we must take a look at.
At least 10 girls and young women say they were groomed or assaulted here, including Annie Farmer, who was 16 when Epstein paid to fly her to Zoro in 1996 to join what she thought were other college hopefuls looking to volunteer overseas. Instead, Farmer found herself alone with a predator who crawled into bed with her before she hid in a bathroom. Shantae Davies has said publicly she was raped twice here. A Jane Doe says Epstein sexually assaulted her with a vibrator there when she was 15, recalling in court testimony feeling so small and powerless. Rachel Benavidez remembers her first time heading up the driveway at Zoro, past multiple security checks in her 20s.
It was very intimidating, and I always wondered if something would happen to me. There was a sense of fear, there was a sense of isolation.
Newly certified as a massage therapist, she met Epstein a couple months later, and that's when she says she was sexually assaulted by him repeatedly.
After the 2 years that I was assaulted, raped, abused, I just completely shut down.
Pressured to return again and again.
I wasn't protected as a child, and so my whole life I just didn't know how to handle myself around men, you know.
Benavidez has rarely spoken publicly before.
Until we are heard, until survivors are heard and believed, then I don't think there's ever going to be any justice.
Does it feel like there were missed chances to hold him accountable?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Justice is not always linear, and here it's been elusive. But the truth, the real story of Zoro Ranch, that could be in reach.
We deserved this story. We too want to know what happened.
This spring, New Mexico's State House unanimously greenlit a commission to investigate Zoro, led by both Democrats and Republicans.
I think what bothers me the most, knowing the extent of what happened, why nothing was done.
Representatives Andrea Reeb and Andrea Romero say the goal is not necessarily criminal prosecution.
It may be too late for a prosecution, obviously, but it's part of what we're doing. It's not the target of what we're doing. The target of what we're doing is trying to help victims get their stories out, help New Mexicans understand what happened, why it happened, who was responsible. Hopefully, It gives these victims some closure.
What do you make of the lengthy history that Epstein had with powerful New Mexicans?
If there is a connection between his ability to outskirt the law because of those political connections, that's something of great importance to all of us.
Bill Richardson was the former governor of New Mexico who died in 2023. He's referenced hundreds of times in the Epstein files, visiting Epstein even years after his Florida plea deal. Virginia Giuffre says Epstein trafficked her to Richardson, who called that allegation completely false.
This is about the rule of law. This is about New Mexico and New Mexicans, and more broadly about the survivors who are part of this story. So whoever comes up.
Even if that's Bill Richardson.
That's right.
The Truth Commission wants to see the unredacted documents in possession of the federal Justice Department, and they want to look at the investigative file New Mexico turned over to the DOJ years ago.
At this point, we don't have the full story, and what we understand is that most of that information was provided to the federal government and has not been provided back.
Help me understand that. Meaning the feds have it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's what we know.
And the feds have not shared that investigative file back with the state?
We've requested, the New Mexico Department of Justice has requested that information and hasn't received it back.
Is that troubling to you?
Troubling is one adjective. I'm also just, we're getting ready to subpoena for the same information if we can't get it through the Department of Justice.
Federal investigators never searched Zorro Ranch, but the state eventually did, just recently in March, after the current New Mexico Attorney General opened his own investigation, granted permission to access what was Epstein's 7,500 acres, plus 1,200 more he leased from the state. NBC News obtained permits from New Mexico to see it for ourselves.
State investigators searched all of this in March. Epstein used to control this land back when the state leased it to him. But some wonder why that search didn't happen sooner and worry this could be the land of missed opportunity.